Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 34. I want to begin by wishing everyone a ksiv v'chsimateva, as traditional to do in the month of Elul. The month of Elul is a preparatory month, both a Chassidus Applied, where we account for all that we did in the previous year, as well as Chassidus Hachana, we prepare for the coming year. And just like when you go to make a major presentation or a proposal, or any important meeting, you wouldn't just fall in, you would do your homework. So the month of Elul is a month of the homework that we do. We prepare ourselves, we attune ourselves, we put ourselves in a state of mind, as well as our families and others, to open up the channels and the kelim and brachas that we wish for the new year. Especially coming after Chai Elul, we're told after Chai Elul, which is the birthday of the Yom Haledah Shnei Me'eres HaGedolim of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, that we have then 12 days, 12-day countdown, with each day corresponding to a month. So in the Chassidus Applied itself, in the counting itself, every day corresponds. So Chai Elul would be Tishrei, Yotes Elul would correspond to Cheshvan, and so on, until we finally come to the last day before Rosh Hashanah. Eibishter should bless every one of us, each one of us, all in good health, in a year of revealed blessings and a year of Geula. We will be talking a little about Elul because some of the questions that came in relate to that, how to make it a meaningful experience and not just mechanical. But I'd like to begin by first tying up some knots and finishing subjects we have not completely finished in the previous episodes, though some of the questions that were presented I did not yet respond to. Namely, I'll begin with music. We're talking about secular music, different types of music, and classical music was the one that I did not address yet. So here's a questioner writes, rock and roll was discussed during the last conversation on music in episode 25, but I feel it's an extreme example. I'm curious if there are any references that you know of it in Igres and other places to classical music. Another writer writes, classical music is generally, with a few exceptions, refined music. Often calming, no words, helps with focus, sets a pleasant atmosphere as background music, etc. Rock and roll is wild and has lyrics that leave little to the imagination, and the same can be said for most other types of secular music, pop, rap, country, etc., which often discuss topics that are obviously inappropriate for Chassidim to be listening to. I don't think the same can be said for classical music. Where then does classical music fall on this spectrum? I believe that the Alter Rebbe Lekutei Torah on Shir HaShirim discusses Nigunim and Zmiris, and the difference between the two. That Nigunim are vocal songs and stem from the Neshama, and that Zmiris are instrumental songs that stem from the Malachim, the angels. It would seem from this that if you're listening to Edel music, instrumental music, refined instrumental music, that isn't inherently pritzizdik. There would be less or nothing to worry about as far as the neshama level goes, because instrumental music doesn't stem from a person's neshama the same way vocal music does. While anything with vocals by a non-Jew would be inherently dangerous because of the neshama to neshama connection intrinsically present, this writer continues, if the music is vocal-less, then it seems that the only issue to consider for instrumental music is the feeling and atmosphere it generates. Or am I taking what the Alter Rebbe says there completely out of context? A question that bothers me even more, the writer continues, I remember a letter from the Rebbe to a camp counselor, I wish I could remember where from, that secular tunes could be used with Jewish words in summer camp only if the music was never used in a pritzizdike context before. But that seems to be the opposite of the trend in today's Jewish music, Jewish quote-unquote, especially at Chassidus. A lot of Jewish music is taking literally the worst parts of secular music and adding Jewish lyrics. How can this music be called more edel or appropriate than classical music? The fact that the lyrics are written or sung or the music is played by Yireh Shamayim somehow overrides the pritzis and crassness of the music itself. Obviously, none of this negates the fact that the Rebbesh and Nigunim are best and Chassidish and Nigunim are second best. Can you please help me clarify these different points? We are Mitzvah Hashem expecting our first child soon. This is an important topic for us because we personally feel that we would much rather have an avir as an environment of calm and peace and pleasant focus generated by classical music than the raunchy and pritzistic vibe of the most Jewish music, even though it has holy words. Okay. Another questioner. I took piano lessons as a child. learning to play intricate classical pieces. I don't have much interest anymore in listening to such music, and I also understand the dangers ruchnius-wise. But at the same time, I would like to renew this skill, especially now that I'm in middle age, and I need to develop new interests to fill my time. I tried to replace it with Chassidic music, but failed to find any written music of that caliber requiring similar dexterity. Another questioner, can a person train to be a classical musician, i.e. study music theory, performance, and instrumental music at a professional level with a teacher and or music conservatory? Is the study and performance of classical music permitted? Okay, well, there's a few more I'd like to read. Actually, one of the writers writes a question, but in the form of an answer as well. So let me read that as well. I find it very intriguing, and please bear with me. It's a little more before I address it more thoroughly. Someone wrote, when you speak next week about classical music, may I suggest you also note that certain classical pieces were created for the church, which would be part of Avodah Zarah. Examples that may be known include Handel's Hallelujah, doesn't finish the end. This individual also sends us to a website where there's more discussion about this. Can classical music be considered Christian? While on the subject, I should also note the concerns of Avodah Zarah seeps into nursery rhymes too. I once called the producer of a Frum CD with songs for kids, and they were shocked to learn that one of their tunes is originally based on When the Saints Go Marching. The nursery rhymes Frere Jacques and Orange and Lemons are about churches and church bells and priests. And finally, one more writer writes, I once saw an Igris Moshe. These are the responses from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, Olav Shalom. A letter from Moshe Feinstein about listening to music from someone that is not openly frum now. He suggests who it may be. Let everyone fill in the blanks. He wrote that if he composed the music before, while he was frum, it's okay. Okay. One of the reasons I also read it was not just to air and share on this platform what people are thinking and saying, it's also to show the diversity. We're literally getting questions like this from so many different directions, which is very encouraging because it's not limited to one narrow spectrum. It's very, very vast, far more than I would have ever expected. If you have a question, please do not hesitate, do not be bashful. We have a completely anonymous and confidential forum at meaningfullife.com/MyLifeLive. If you want to write to me personally so I can respond in any way, write to Simon, my name, at meaningfullife.com. And this is an example of people, different interests, different experiences, and extremely relevant to them for sure, and I'm sure to many of us that we can learn from this. I will share, as I've done in the past, that which I have seen, what I've heard, and things that I'm not positive of, I'll share that I will speculate, or based on the spirit of what I understand from the Rebbe Sichos, the Maimorim, and from Chassidus and Torah in general. I looked, and I could not find in the Igris, as one questioner asked, direct reference to classical music as opposed to other types of music. You have to remember, if you go back to episode 25 when I spoke about music, though, yes, you can make a distinction between vocal and instruments, however, there's another aspect that is being missed in this writer's letter, and that is the author of the composer of the music is investing his soul, his or her soul for that matter, into the music they create. And this is whether it's vocal or it's instrumental. Whether Mozart and Beethoven and Bach and other greats that were classical composers, the Middle Ages, called the great masters, just like it is with art, it doesn't really matter whether it's a vocal or it's an instrument. They're communicating a feeling and a sentiment that they got in touch with. Now, no one ever suggested that that sentiment or feeling is necessarily shlosh klippos hatmeis, not necessarily. We know he says, Teira b'goyim al taimin, chochma b'goyim taimin. We know that among the nations of the world, and this would include everybody, that just as they can compose great works of philosophy and science, medicine, astronomy, why can they not compose beautiful music that conveys very profound passions and feelings about life, about misery, about anxiety, about the ups and downs of a person's life, which is what music evokes. On the other hand, to say that it's coming from Kedusha, because when they're investing their neshama experiences into the music, and their music is conveying that, that also includes whatever thoughts and whatever feelings they may have had when they composed it. So this gets into an area where I'm not going to be a rav here and paskin whether you should or should not listen to classical music, but you're talking about it from the Chassidish ruach of the spirit. The fact of the matter is, it's coming from people who you have no idea what kind of lives they lived. It could have been very decadent lives, though they're geniuses. This is common. You could have people who are brilliant in certain areas, and yet that doesn't mean they don't have many things in life you wouldn't want to expose your children to. Now, it's difficult for me to just go up and say that because, classical music is beautiful music. No question, it's calming, it has many effects. But is that necessarily what you want to be infusing, especially into your young children? You want to have Kedusha. That's why we surround, especially children who are impressionable, and their souls are yet like a warm ball of wax, that every impression will make an indelible mark for their entire lives. I would suggest that you surround them as much as possible with Kedusha. When a person comes of age, wants to make choices, then they can make choices. Listen, a lot of things we do, what I say that listening to classical music is the biggest sin a person can do, I won't say that either. We have things that are mitzvahs, we have things that are prohibited, there are things that are reshus. Whether this goes in the category of reshus, I'm not even sure. Is it the category of bittul Torah, for example? We're supposed to be learning Torah all the time. So, the bottom line is, wherever that music is sourced, even if it's coming from an edler place, and to you and I, it's pleasant to our ear, and it's not violent, and it doesn't have lyrics that are necessarily promiscuous or suggestive, and so on, pritzizdik as you put it, it's still coming from a source that is not necessarily Moshe Rabbeinu, lahavdil. And as such, on the contrary, you can say because of its edelkeit, because of its refinement, it's even more subtle, the message that it may communicate to a soul. So being that we're not masters of souls, I would be careful in this regard once you're asking the question. Not every question has to be asked. As I said, people do many things today. People read newspapers, people read books. Is listening to classical music worse than reading a newspaper or a book? Navdafka. The Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, he doesn't talk about goyish music, he talks about chochmas chitzenis, that it's metame the Chabad shebenefesh. The question is, would that refer also to music coming from non-holy or non-religious or non-Torah sources? Perhaps. It could be maybe affect even more. It's not Chabad, but it's Chagas. It touches the heart. We know music is the language of the soul. Kulmas halev, kulmas hanefshama is the language of the heart, is the quill of the heart, quill of the soul. So being that we're not masters, in general it's always best, if you're asking the question of holiness, it's not the holiest thing. Is it the worst thing we do on earth today in this 21st century? Probably not either. If you have to choose between the two, I don't know if this is the category of a psak. It's more of a category of common sense, knowing when a person comes to you individually and you have to go to your mashpia, you gauge where they're at. To start telling a person to become stringent in matters like this when they're doing things that are far more questionable, you have to know your priorities. So I'm not going to address here whether one should do it or not. I'm just addressing the discussion. So it doesn't necessarily mean because it's more refined or it doesn't have words, it means less tuma or less holiness. More holiness. That doesn't necessarily mean that. Above all, as we spoke when we spoke about secular education, the bottom line is that everything in this world that's not divine and therefore not driven by bittul, like he teaches in Tanya in Perek Vav, he says, Kedusha is defined by bittul. Anything that's not bittul is not Kedusha. The bittul of these great geniuses is questionable, how much bittul telekuz they had. Does it mean that they didn't have? It could be that genius itself, that God gave them such a gift. So I'm not going to suggest otherwise, but to say that it has that bittul, which is what really a soul needs nurturing, especially in a musical state, that is questionable. And that's why I don't want to just make that distinction and say classical music is kosher, all the other music is unkosher. Regarding the other musicians, how they stick words into to those songs, I don't know where that comes from. I don't know if that's based on any halacha or based on any chassidus. It's convenient. You take a song, a popular song, you stick some words to it, and that's that. Again, is it the worst thing on earth? I don't think so. But nevertheless, it's still doesn't make it holy. Just because someone is a frum person playing that music, or it's being used with Hebrew words, doesn't suddenly make that music, because it's the same purpose. That song originated elsewhere. Now, of course, you can get into the question, what about being Maila, being elevating the music? I mentioned Napoleon's March, the Marseille, the French Marseille, the Rebbe Tovshin Lamed transformed into a Hadaras V'Amuna. That's a Rebbe doing it. A Rebbe has the power, knows which song and how to do it and so on. You don't have it every day, even from the Rabbeim. So to say that because a frum musician is singing a song, that suddenly elevates it, not necessarily. But remember, everything in this world can be done l'shem shamayim. You could take something that you buy in a secular store, so to speak, or you take a piece of wisdom, chachma b'goyim tamin, and turn it into a tool for avodas Hashem. So there you could say there is that ability. But I wouldn't go ahead and start koshering music just because we're doing that. Is it possible? This is a question for a Rav to answer whether it's allowed. If it's allowed, then that means then you're able to be ma'aleh to kedusha. If it's not allowed, you're not able to. So therefore, I defer that the psak should be a Rav's psak. And based on that psak, that's how we determine whether it's something that's reshus, that you can elevate it l'shem shamayim, like he says in Tanya, or if it's asur b'deach yitzeinim, means it's not. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to go there. This is a question which I don't have a black and white answer for. Overall, as I said, we know about chochmas umas, and music is far more subtle and far more nuanced. As far as studying music, piano lessons and so on, the fact is, Ma'aseh b'chol yom, you find it in homes of Yerushalayim, you find it in homes of Chassidus Applied as well, and we know that the Rebbe did definitely allow people had asked the Rebbe never said do not. So I think it's a discretion of a personal decision at home to teach a child music. You could say, if that's the case, doesn't that mean that they're exposed? Well, you could look at it like what he says in Tanya. You're using it as a kardim lachter, but they're not kardim lachter, but you're using it in some way to develop a talent that God blessed people with music, and to use it for the Shem Shemayim L'Kedusha. So you could see there, obviously, in many of the music lessons, especially the classics are used. So there, clearly, there is some type of opening for that. Can any music be played? That's a good question. What about rock and roll? Let's say you don't play it with words. You just, the music itself, the instrumental. There's some beautiful rock and roll songs as well, written by composers, even of our modern times. And you're not going to stop measuring the Yerushalayim of one composer to the next, just because the sound was different. Even though it's true, rock and roll has far more suggestive sound. Everyone knows the beat, where it comes from. But nevertheless, if it's used, for example, for a piano lesson for a student, it's a good question. I don't have a black and white answer. If anybody wants to weigh in on this, I'm more than happy to welcome any feedback. I have not seen directly something from the Rebbe or the Rabbeim, but it may be something I haven't seen or missed. In the spirit of everything, as I said, you want to surround with Kedusha, it's very clear. We have enough Chassidish, Rebbeische music, like the Run of the Writer's Rights, and you could surround yourself with that all day. And there are weddings you go to, and you only hear Lubavitch and Nigunim, Chassidish and Nigunim. Doesn't mean the wedding has less simcha. It's a different, maybe a different environment, and some people consider it to be holier. But I'm not here into holier than thou. I think I said enough. I think it goes into, again, the discussion of what is the shus. There are many things we do today, as I said, from reading newspapers or books or other things that are similar category. And that doesn't mean it's holy or mutter. It just means people do it. Now, as far as classical musician, I think it goes a little in the category where the Rebbe writes about, or tells people who went to college, and when they want to drop out, the Rebbe often tells them to finish and get their degree. I think someone who's been trained in music, already been trained, and is a classical musician or on the way, what's wrong with seeing that as just like a scientist or someone going to college? Maybe even better. And to adrab, finish, master your art, and use it. Go to round places and inspire people toward things that are holy and godly and so on. I don't see any reason why a person cannot be a classical musician. Should be the first option when you have options of career. That's again case by case, depending on your talent. We discuss shlichus. The first option should always be is to fulfill your mission in this world. But if music happens to be your mission, then it's something you have to consider. But for B'das l'chatchila to go dafka that direction, not necessarily. And again, I'm avoiding halacha questions or questions that deserve approaching a personal mashpia, a personal mentor who can hear more of the situation, because there's certain things that you cannot answer generically. Different situations warrant different responses. You have a child, for example, that's very musically talented. So you're going to say, okay, you know what, no music, and let him just sit and learn Torah all day. He may not be a keli for that. So maybe music is an outlet for that child. Case by case by case. I'm speaking in general terms. Now, obviously, things that come from the church or Avodah Zarah, there's no reason to go there. Why have to go krich in a place where, as I said, maybe too dubious, too many questions? Why go there? There's no mitzvah to have to go listen to such music. As we all discussed earlier, it's not a mitzvah to all of this. Everything we're discussing is if it's allowed, whether you can elevate it, how non-permissible is it. But to say, l'chatchila, initially we should go, especially in those areas, I would absolutely avoid that. And it's true, the nursery rhymes and so on. Again, I don't believe in extremism, where someone's going to now become a witch hunter and look for every nursery rhyme and every tune in every school. Please definitely don't use my name to go around and witch hunting, and let's eradicate trave busters with torches and all kinds of other radical means. Every song that may not be appropriate. If you become aware of something, obviously, always best to change things calmly and intelligently, and b'divrei b'derech shel nachas, divrei chacham b'nachas tishman, calmly, gently, and so on. To make things into wars, holy wars, is never healthy. So if you find out, so I would not to turn this into a crusade. If we know something that seems to be a song you can replace, so fine. Suggest a different nursery rhyme, suggest a different tune. There are plenty of good tunes. Sometimes it's simply an innocent mistake. People are not aware of certain music and so on. But I don't think the approach should be one of a new crusade. This is now the problem that the whole world is suffering from, and this is the yesod of all our issues. Now, everything has to be done in a more balanced way. Because if you start looking with a microscope, since I'm on the topic, you have to also look at yourself with a microscope. And look at, and we know that that when you want to judge someone, how do you judge him? By asking him what he thinks about someone else in that given situation. And then you apply, he's basically ruling it on himself. Especially in this period of time, we're looking to find limudei schus and find merit in others. So it's always healthier to always find the merit in any given situation. So that more or less covers this topic, and I could close it for now until new questions come in, and we could address it further. Let's go on to the next question. Next question is connected to the month of Elul. Being we're in this month, as I mentioned before, it's called both Chodesh HaCheshbon and Chodesh HaChana. It's the last of the 12 months of the year, or this year was 13 months, it was a leap year. And it's also the beginning, the preparation for the coming year. Both aspects. And they're obviously interconnected. So here a questioner writes, I struggle with this every year. What exactly do I need to do to make a cheshbon for the past? Cheshbon means accountability. I mean, how am I supposed to remember all my wrongdoings of the past year? Also, from the 18th of Elul till Rosh Hashanah, there's 12 days, each day corresponding to another month. How is this done? Okay, one question. This leads me to a number of other questions that are connected, which we'll address next week more at length, a special Rosh Hashanah edition. But being that it's Elul and we're already preparing, let me read a few more questions in this context. The month of Elul is a time of introspection. We have been taught that is a time of spiritual counting and really taking stock. Year after year, we go through this, and frankly, it's all the same. I often come out feeling no different. If Rosh Hashanah truly is a new energy, how can I actually harness it to infuse and re-energize my life with Yiddishkeit? Okay. And now I go over to, in general, a question about the whole mechanical and lip service of Judaism. Rosh Hashanah every year we're told is the new year. Elul we prepare and we're supposed to be serious. I look around and I see myself and others. We go through the motions, some of us more than others, and frankly there's no real difference. Every year it's a mechanical experience. Every year it's another more of lip service. We read through the Machzor on Rosh Hashanah. It's a long Machzor. How many people truly understand what they're reading? So are we satisfied with this lip service? What else can we do to infuse our Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and this whole high holiday season with a deeper sense of meaning, a deeper sense of passion, and so on? I want to broaden the question because really it's a question not just Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it's for all year round. So here's another series of questions that come into the same category. All the question of how mechanical are we, how cultural is our Judaism, and how much of it is it really by choice, in the sense filled with vitality and passion. And I think everybody knows the difference between mechanics, being mechanical and automatic pilot, and doing something with passion and vitality. Look at your life. Look at your life. What are the things that excite you most? And I'm not going to list them all. Find something, fill the blanket. And then look how much of your Yiddishkeit is in that category. Sadly, like anything in life, we may do it out of obligation, we may do it out of guilt, we may do it out of making a deal with God as we come into the new year, but passion and vitality is a very particular type of experience. And obviously, Chassidus Applied, MyLife, what more important thing to talk about is what Chassidus did for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, as it did for all of Yiddishkeit. And that's why I want to broaden the topic into the general state of mind of individuals. How do you inspire the uninspired? We can categorize it as that. And here's a few questions I want to read. I am a Lubavitcher married with 2 kids, Baruch Hashem. I feel like I'm lacking inner peace and happiness. Even though I have so many blessings in my life and try to do good things, I still feel sad so often. I take antidepressants and might be clinically depressed. My question is how this goes with Chassidus. I feel funny doing Mivtzoim and convincing others to take this path because it's what their soul needs. If I feel such a lack of inner peace, and it's not working for me. Also, I often feel I want to just escape by watching a movie. I know it's not good for me, but I feel like I need to escape the intensity of being a frum chassid sometimes. With all this pressure to always do the right thing and bring a Mashiach. Thank you for this opportunity to ask. And thank you for being all candid and open. This is the whole purpose of this forum. This platform is to be able to talk about matters like this. Okay. I am sure that all of us have similar sentiments, maybe not quite in this context, in different contexts. So I think it's not just a very individual question to one person. Each of us has similar issue. Another question. Reciting monotonous words I don't understand isn't cutting it anymore. On fast days, reciting slichus or saying kinus with my minyan is an uttermost boring experience. I don't know the meaning of most of the words and didn't feel like the service was bringing me closer to God or helping me get excited about tshuva. With Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur on the horizon, prayer, heavy holidays, I must ask, do you really think the Chazal intended that our generation is meant to observe it in this way? Maybe this was just for earlier, wiser generations who knew how to pray. It just seems like there is no meaning reciting words which most of us don't understand. Most of us have a hard enough time learning and concentrating on the regular davening, which we do every day. Seems like we are beating a dead horse. I'm reading it uncensored, as you can see. On a similar note, I dread Shabbos Mevarchim. Yes, I'm familiar with the Hayom Yom, which states that we only knew the Nachas, if we only knew the Nachas in Shamayim from reciting Tehillim, we would recite it all day long. And how Shabbos Mevarchim Tehillim is one of the things which ensures that our children will continue in the ways of Torah mitzvahs. But b'poyel, it is a miserable experience. I read slowly, and it takes me 3.5 hours to finish Tehillim. And I spend most of the time reciting words that I, for the most part, don't understand, while spacing out the whole time and thinking about all other weekly thoughts, and have daydreams that pop into my mind the whole time. Any advice? Well, I'm glad to see that you trust me enough to share this whole intimate experience with all the adjectives you used. And I, though it's painful to read, yet, if we're not going to address things in a direct way, what's the point? And I'm sure you may be articulating things that other people have in mind, but they're not, either they don't have the courage, or they don't want to acknowledge, or they would rather not even address this. But I will absolutely address it. I think it's vital. So you see how this is part of the context. Obviously, whatever we experience all year round becomes so much more amplified on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur because the davening is longer, the days are more intense, everything is more, people are more responsive. It's kiruv hamoyrel anitzutz in the language of Chassidus, which means the source and the spark. The soul gets closer to its source. Dirshu Hashem b'motzei b'karev b'motzei Karabi Yese Karav, Karubi Yese Karav, that we beseech God when He's to be found and call out to Him when He's close. So the Chazal explained that's Daseres Yemei Tshuva, because things that are less veils, less layers, less shrouds that block the divine flow. So whatever is all year round, if your Judaism is monotonous all year round, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur could be even more so. You could also argue the other way around, that at least a few days a year, you're more inspired. But the fact of the matter is that when you go through these experiences, you always ask, how did I come out differently than when I entered? And if after Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur you ended up being exactly as it was before, even though you may have been inspired at the moment, it just reflects on some of what these people have been writing. So, my dear friends, this is exactly what Chassidus came to contribute. This is not a side note. There's no better time to talk about the contribution of Chassidus. And maybe that's why Chayel is Taka Chayel. It could have been Chay of any month. It's in 12 days before Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. To bring a Chayis into Elul. What does a Chayis mean? It means vitality. You can do something monotonous, boring, mechanically. You have to be Yetzir. We all do things all the time like this. How many people, for example, brush their teeth with passion? I know there are a few OCD people that probably do that. But it's something you learn mechanically. You have to do it, you do it. Many other things become habits. And sometimes a habit is a fine thing. You lock it away, it's a habit, it's a good habit. You don't have to think about it much. But when it comes to spirituality, relationship with God, when it comes to relationships, period, that's a death knell when you don't have vitality. Because if you're not busy being born, you're busy dying. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya Perek Tezvav, whole chapter, powerful chapter, kedai to read, worthwhile reading during this month, during any month, but especially during this month because you'll see there the importance of doing something different. I know Apple has tried to coin the line, think different, but the truth is this is a classic Jewish concept that goes back to the Gemara and Menachos and so on, even before that. B'chol yem yiyu beinecha chadoshim. We find in the Torah, you'll find it says the word hayom many times. Hayom. Right? V'yadaita hayom, atem nitzovim hayom. Because of the words hayom, what does hayom mean today? When you read it, what is today? When you read it now, is it today? Yutes Elul, Tovshinayin Daled? Or is hayom when Moshe Rabbeinu said it? So Rashi says from Sifri, a number of times he brings, hayom means to teach us something. Because remember, the word Torah could have not used the word hayom. Moshe could have not used hayom. It could have just said, v'yadaita, you should know God. Which would mean any time in any time you have to know v'yadaita hayom, v'ashavesa l'levecha, ki Hashem hu Elokim, or atem nitzov hayom, and all the other different hayoms that are used throughout the Torah. It comes to teach us something. That the Torah mitzvah should not be it should not be like an old package, like an old hat, as they call it. It should be something that is revitalized and new. Sometimes it says kichadoshim, b'chol yem yir beinecha kichadoshim. Every day it should be like new, ki, and some places it says chadoshim mamish, and the Rebbe makes a whole fuss about the difference. Kichadoshim means as if it's new, and chadoshim means mamish new. How could you expect a person who's doing something every day, put on tefillin every day for a man, besides Shabbos and Yontif? You daven every day. You give tzedakah every day. You do Shabbos every week. How could you expect a person to do it mamish like new? It's part of habit. We're creatures of habit, and now we do it mechanically. That's what the Torah is coming to say, hayom. It recognizes human nature, that human nature is such that we can become creatures of habit, mechanical Jews, and the Torah is saying no. You have to do it with revitalized energy, not just like it's new, but as new itself. Maybe the reason you have like it's new because not everybody can reach the level of mamish new. That means, every Shabbos should be like a new thing. People always ask the question about davening, which answers some of the questions being asked here. Why are we told to read the same tefillah again and again and again? Isn't tefillah aveda shebelev? Ezu aveda shebelev, zui tefillah. What service of the heart tefillah? When you're learning Torah, you can understand Torah is halacha, or primis ha-Torah. Torah is facts. It's knowledge. So obviously, you have to know what those facts are. They don't change every minute. The joke goes, a guy said, I have my principles. And then he looked around very insecurely and says, and if you don't like them, I have another set of principles. When it comes to Torah, that's a set of principles. It's a body of wisdom. In Torah, there's la fosha. Where you machadish, you could add, you could understand more, but the basics are the certain principles. When it comes to tefillah, you're speaking from your heart. My heart is different than your heart. Why are we both saying the same word, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad? Why can't I just speak to my God, to my Father, from my heart? It would be much more natural. Whatever is bothering me now, whatever I need. The mitzvah says of tefillah is when you daven when you need something. Let me say it in my own language, whatever language that is. It's far easier. Why are we forcing me to take my heart and force myself to read a Hebrew I cannot read? And if it's from the heart, my heart today is different than yesterday. Why are you telling me that we have to say the same prayer? And I come to a shul and everybody's saying the same thing. Everybody's heart in the same place? It's a very good question. Tefillah should really be people just go into a place, introspective, close your eyes, and speak to God like you would speak to your father. The answer is that if you take a davening mechanically, without kavanah, so like the Alter Rebbe brings from the Shalom and other places, it's like a guf b'lei neshama. Davening without kavanah is like a body without a soul. It doesn't use the word, but it means a corpse. So to say it's nothing, you cannot say. A corpse is a corpse. But to say it's alive, you definitely can either. Dafke tefillah. There are things you can do without kavanah, like tzedakah. The job gets done. But here, without a soul, basically it's lifeless. So what exactly is, so what is the meaning behind it all? So we know that many of the prayers are based on David HaMelech, on the book of Tehillim. Not all, but many. David HaMelech said, Yiyu l'rotzen imrei fi. What does that mean? So the Medrash explains that it should be your desire, he said to God, that imrei fi, the words that I uttered from my mouth, the supplications, my cries, my beseeching, my requests, my heartfelt prayers that I said to you through my life, which was primarily in the book of Tehillim, Psalms. That this should become the words that every Jew utters till the end of history. And the Eibishter considered his request and granted it and said yes. Because Tehillim could have ended up being David HaMelech's personal cry to the Eibishter, which it is. His story, his tragic life, his difficulties, and all his challenges, as he documents in Tehillim. The Eibishter infused, that was his request, and it was granted. Infused it, we can call it now, it's divine poetry. It's no longer just human poetry. It's not just David HaMelech, who's a tzaddik, and all that. But now it's infused with the divine power. So think of it, lahavla, we were talking before about music. Musical notes, there are only that many musical notes on the scale, 7, 8. Someone will come and say, I'm going to be mechadish a new musical note. Why? Because I want to be very passionate. That's ridiculous. There's only that many sounds on the spectrum. However, to play that musical note, you can play it in a million ways, infinite ways. You could hear two people play the same song, and one person that sounds ridiculous, sounds empty, hollow, and the other person to bring you to tears, transform you, transport you to another time and place. The same song. Because there's two things. There's the musical notes. The musical notes of Shema Yisrael, which is not even David, that's a pasuk in Chumash. And also the books of Tehillim, and all the other things, the Anshe Knesset Agdela and the others that established prayer, including the prayers of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, are musical notes. If you play it hollow, look at musical notes on a piece of paper, it doesn't mean anything. You suddenly see someone play it or sing it in the right way, it comes alive. So can you technically sit and talk, we know that, and to God from your heart without any words? Yeah, we know the story of Rukukuriku, Rosh Hashanah. He saw everybody crying, the farm boy, and he didn't know how to pray. So he just said, kukuriku, kukuriku, imitating what he knew, the roosters cry in the morning, because that's what he knew. And that pierced all the heavens because it came from sincerity. But how much more so, if you that's like playing music by ear. But how much more so if he knew also the letters, if he knew the notes. So what we have here is David HaMelech gave us, forged a path. He's a master of crying to God. He told us, here are words that work. And once God granted him the request, now those words are infused with that type of power. But just to have the words without the soul, obviously, is as I said, it's like a corpse. So we need a combination of both, which means technically, Kol Yom Yeh Chadoshim, no two Shema Yisrael should ever be said the same way. By the same person even. Same day. Because Hashem Echad has so many meanings in it. What does Echad mean for you right now? May mean something else that it meant an hour ago. And two separate people for sure not. I was saying the same words. We're saying the same words because that is the power of synergy. Not in any way, God forbid, to annihilate or to eliminate an individual's needs. The whole davening is your needs, not someone else's needs. Your tzrachim. But to create the power that you get when you're able to do something that has been done before, people who have forged the path. You play the music and you sing the words the way those that were masters of it before. But now with your particular flair and flavor and touch and pitch and soul, neshama. That's Yiddishkeit. The fact that people see the rigidity and inflexibility of Shabbos and kosher, because they're seeing cultural behavior. They're seeing mechanical Judaism. They're not seeing the neshama. What did the Baal Shem Tov come, it says, to do? He came to wake up Yisrael. That's why his name is Yisrael. When someone faints, you call him by his name. So Yisrael, Eden, the Klal Yisrael, in a state of Isalfus. That's what it says, a faint. Imagine someone fainting. You're not going to just ignore them. It was a spiritual faint. Now, if you think about it, Baal Shem Tov's times, you're talking about the 17th century, the 18th century, the end of the 17th, the beginning of the 18th century. What is Salfus? Gashmis Jews were suffering. But Ruchnius, Judaism was thriving in most communities. It was just the beginning of assimilation, a modern assimilation. So in many ways, you could actually say Chassidus is even more important today than then, because if you want a Salfus today, we have it. Both in the fact that the majority, the number of Jews are not aware of their roots and what Yiddishkeit is in general. So clearly they don't have a relationship, and therefore there's a state of Salfus. But I'd be bold enough and go ahead and say they Salfus even more so by people who did grow up with it, because it's mechanical. You can be a cultural Jew and still be asleep, and still be faint. That's what Chassidus came to do, to bring chayis into Elul, chayis into Yiddishkeit. Vitality. Vitality doesn't create anything new. The Frierdiker Rebbe was once asked by a group of German rabbis. He was in Germany, and a delegation of German rabbis, Orthodox German rabbis, came to see him, and they said, we don't have Chassidus. What did Chassidus come to contribute to Yiddishkeit? We're a strong, an old community. The German Jewry goes back over 1,000 years. What are we missing? They were sitting in the lobby of a beautiful hotel. The Frierdiker Rebbe pointed and said to them, what do you see in this room here? They pointed out the most outstanding feature was very, very magnificent, exquisite marble pillars. So they pointed out the marble pillars, they're beautiful. Frierdiker Rebbe stood up, walked over to one of the pillars. There was a lamp near the couch there. They followed him, and he shined the lamp on the pillar and said, what do you see now? Oh, now we see the delicate and beautiful engravings that are shaped within the marble, the flowers, other type of beautiful images. Why didn't you say that earlier? They said, because we were looking from a distance. From a distance, we saw these grand pillars. You look closely, you see the artistic element, the details. So that's what Chassidus came to do. Didn't come to create new pillars, Chas v'sholom. Everything was given at Sinai. Everything. The question is, do you see the beauty? Or are you looking from a distance? What Chassidus does, illuminates. It's a lamp. It illuminates the inner beauty. What did the Baal Shem Tov teach? Avos Yisrael, Simcha, Hashgacha Pratis, Hisavos B'chol Rega. Fundamental principles. They all existed before the Baal Shem Tov. Avos Yisrael is V'havta Lecha Kamecha. Zeh Klal Godel B'Teira Rabbi Akiva says. This is long before the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov is Mechadash Avos Yisrael. And Ivdus Hashem B'Simcha. And the other things I mentioned and other things. So there may be particular chidushim, as Chassidus explains, in each of those. But the overall principle that God is the divine providence is in the hands of God. So good is before was Hashgacha Pratis, Hashgacha Klolis. But the idea, the answer is the Baal Shem Tov's chidush, like the Rebbe says in Tzar Yichud V'Amunah, U'pirish HaBaal Shem Tov. What does the Baal Shem Tov say? Le'elam Hashem dvarach nitzav b'shamayim. That God's word always is sustaining heaven and all of existence. U'pirish Baal Shem Tov, Hisavas b'chol rega, that every second God renews it. What does he add over what it says in the pasuk? Hamachadish b'tuve b'chol yom tov in Ma'aser Bereishis, we say in davening. And there's a Medrash Tilim that talks about this point. What the Baal Shem Tov comes, so it says Pirish. Pirish means not just taich, Pirish means verspreit. He spread it, he illuminated the point. But illumination, when no one knows about it or no one's focusing on it, can be a major chiddush. Because when a person, for example, is faint, they're not dead, God forbid. They're alive. But their chayis is not revealed. The Baal Shem Tov came and whispered Yisrael in the ear of every Jew and says, my friend, Avis Yisrael. Why? Because you have a neshama. Simcha. Savas b'chol rega. So he revealed and imbued the neshama into everything. The Alter Rebbe showed us, Baal Shem Tov showed us that everyone can reach it. The Alter Rebbe showed us how we can reach it. Developed it into a comprehensive system. So this is exactly what Chassidus came to do. Take a month of Elul, instead of doing it mechanically, come alive with it. Instead of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur being just a lip service thing, turn it into an experience. So I ask, of course, how do you do it? Well, the first thing is you can't keep doing what you did till now. We talked about think different. If you think what you thought, and you say what you said, and you do what you did, you know what you're going to have? What you had. I know it's a brilliant statement, but that's basically a mathematical certainty. If nothing changes, nothing changes. But they say a sign of insanity, doing the same thing, expecting different results. So the first thing is, don't expect some magic to happen. You're going to do exactly the same. You're going to read lip service, and you're going to expect Grace Giluyim. It's not going to happen that way. Maybe God, and God will bless you with a miracle. You want to do this properly, that's why we have a month of Elul. Let's not go cold turkey. Take one tefillah. We prepare, the person who's going to blow shofar blows every day. Prepares for shofar before Rosh Hashanah. Why do we blow every day shofar? One of the reasons is to acclimate ourselves to it. The same thing, not mechanically, let's acclimate ourselves. Take a tefillah. It could be a Rosh Hashanah tefillah, Yom Kippur tefillah. Maybe that's part of what slichus is. It's a similar taste, same nigun as the Rosh Hashanah and the Yom Narayim. But not just do it mechanically. Focus on it. Figure out a need you have in your life. What would you like God should bless you with next year? Think about it. Don't answer quickly. Then find yourself a tefillah. Prepare yourself like you do homework. Research. Find a tefillah that speaks to that. And see, how can I read this tefillah in a unique, new way? The Alter Rebbe writes in Hilchos Yom Kippurim that sometimes better to say one tefillah with kavanah than say all of it without kavanas. Now we still daven and we still say many things, lip service. You know why? Because the Eibishter helps. The Shliach Tzibur says it, so the words themselves have power. Just like any music, but it's a whole different story if it's coming with your neshama. So if you really take seriously this idea, it's not going to happen without your effort. And I'm answering now the questions to all the people that have written, whether it's about Elul or Tishrei or about all year round. You have to find a way to bring vitality into your Yiddishkeit. And you do it by looking for creative and original ways to infuse, not to change anything, you don't have to change the musical notes. It's doing it in a passionate and personal way. And one of the tricks of the trade is to include someone else into it. Meir eine shneim Hashem, shneim Havaya. The Alter Rebbe writes in the introduction to Tanya that when you help another, but God blesses that both of you get illuminated. That's the fastest way to do it today. A chavrusa, or teach someone, or share something with someone. Then it forces you to have to get out of your comfort zone and do something not just by habit. A Shabbos table, very easy to fall into the trap of just doing Shabbos every week the same. Bring a guest to the table, someone that challenges you. Then suddenly you come alive. So we have to do things, introduce elements into our Judaism, into our lives, that will evoke the need, the natzchonis even, the sense of competitive sense. I want to succeed. And this is true across the board, whether it's in relationship with God or relationship with each other, vitality. So this dreading Shabbos Mevarchim and the other expressions that this individual wrote, well, you know something, if you keep on staying where you are, you're going to continue dreading it. Why live a life of dread? Maybe turn things around. This is where we need to look to this. This is where we need each other. You can inspire yourself, find people who are inspired. The worst thing is to just stay in a rut and surround yourself with other people in a rut. Those are guaranteed lethargic forces that will just keep you trapped forever. The key is to do something different and act differently, and not do it in extremes. Tafasta maruba le tafasta. If you try to do it in extremes, you end up not doing anything. You take one prayer, one act, one mitzvah, and you do it well. You do it excellent. You do it with passion. As far as the individual that writes that I'm depressed and I don't have any passion, any enthusiasm, how could I work for others? Well, you know something? If you feel that you're mobilized in the Rebbe's army and you were charged that you have to inspire someone else, then even if you're not in the mood, that's what you do. And that alone will inspire you. So to say what comes first, the chicken or the egg, the horse or the cart, what comes first is get the action done. And I think commitment is a big one, feeling that you're committed and this is your job, this is what you should be doing. Okay. Now, I've talked about this topic many times in previous weeks, different contexts, and I hope this was helpful. We'll definitely talk about it some more, especially as we approach next week before Rosh Hashanah. But because I want to cover a few other things, so suffice it to say that we will stop here with this on this topic. I want to address the topic of iPhones, which isn't just iPhones. Now, I wish if my censors had allowed me, that's a joke, I have no censorship, but I'm self-censorship, let's put it this way. I would have loved to read this note in its entirety. However, it's a little over the line. But I'll just give you the gist of it. It's written very well. It begins like this. My Chassidic husband uses his iPhone too much. I don't have the energy or time to fight a holy war or stand outside my husband's tent with my shaitel off to save him. I just know that the way it's going now is very wrong. Perhaps you have some advice on how we can help our husbands and ourselves break the addiction. Anyway, this letter continues on in very almost explicit terms. And when you read it, you think that the husband's having an affair. Because he talks about treating his iPhone, or I guess any mobile. iPhone is, let's not be discriminate against mobile. There's Androids, there's the others, the Samsungs and all the others. I can't tell you the list, I'm not an expert, but I do see them around. And she describes it literally like his priority is this phone over her. And day and night, in and out, wherever you go. She's dependable, entertaining, always available to meet his needs, boredom, avoidance, or relaxation. The only time he's not trapped, entangled, and controlled by her clutches is on Shabbos, from sunrise to sunset. But beyond that, he's always with her. Similar to an observant smoker. Anyway, the woman goes on to describe that her husband is actually a very good man, good father and good husband. The words of the Rebbe are real to him. He's patient, loving, and kind. But this thing remains a force that controls his life. Middle of the night, in the morning. Okay, that's a good way to put it. And I think it reminds us, all of us have this unfortunate, once you have this phone with you, it's a major intrusive force. And the question is, what do we do about this? She continues writing this, I think I can read. I know, sweet husband of mine, the perfect other half of my soul, your tremendous malice and ability to concentrate on Chassidus and Yiddishkeit, if you applied yourself. But nevertheless, this consumption is very disturbing. If you would know consciously to choose to minimize the amount of control that this force has over your life. I daven for you every day that you have the strength to overcome your challenges and fulfill your potential as a true chassid of the Rebbe. Okay, not to be fair and not to be one-sided. Another questioner does the other way around. My wife is addicted to her iPhone. I brought it up so many times to her, but no avail. Any ideas? Okay, let's address this. Well, I think it's a good segue from what we discussed earlier. Remember, the relationship between us and God is reflective of the relationship between us and our spouses. Anila deidi v'deidi li, El. I am to my beloved is to me. It refers to God, of course, and also refers to each individual. Because we were created in the divine image. Yem chasanos zeh matan teira, chas and kala. This chas and kala, the divine and and the id and the person, and there's chas and kala, individuals. Well, in our relationship with God, we have this problem as well. So let's talk about it as I discussed earlier. When you're mechanical, your relationship with God you just take for granted, and you're busy, distracted with all kinds of things of this world. So you could really use the mobile phone and technology today as an example, a mashal for all the distractions that keep us away from our priority. Now we understand that all of us need all kinds of different stimulation. The iPhone and the mobile power in our lives is an excellent escape. You could always turn to it, always a new email, intriguing thing, and it keeps you very busy. And it's definitely an addiction. Is it of the worst addictions? May not be the worst addictions, but as I mentioned before, sometimes the more subtle addictions are worse than the more crass ones, because they work their way in a very insidious way into our lives. I don't really have an answer what you should say to your spouse, because generally speaking, when spouses start confronting each other in these matters, all the resistance, the defenses come up, and the pride and so on. They start saying, you think, and you don't give me attention, I don't give you, there becomes a tit for tat, and it usually doesn't work when you try to be a mashpia to your spouse. However, the Rebbe speaks often, the best way is offense, not defense. If you can find things that are intriguing between you and your spouse, you can find ways to entice, to stimulate, and so on, then you have a fighting chance. Now I know it's a little ridiculous, you have to be competing with some piece of machinery to get your spouse's attention. It's not a spouse situation, but I was once in a car trying to talk to somebody sitting right near me, and they were texting. I had no choice, so I texted them. And the guy looks at the phone, he says, why are you texting me? You're sitting right near me. He was taken, what are you doing? So I said, because I'm trying to get your attention, and you're busy with the phone. That's the world in which we live in. Mechanics, technology, and so on. Thank God for Shabbos. I think that, like anything, it's a challenge in life. It's a metaphor. What distracts you? I think to myself, the whole technology and internet began in 1994, right after Gimel Tammuz. Mamash after Gimel Tammuz. I checked. There was no iPhones and no internet in Fabrengens in 92 and earlier. The Rebbe, though no man like the Rebbe touched and was interested in changing the world with technology in every possible means, so technology is a divine tool to bring Mala Aretz Deis Hashem, spreading Chassidus Yiddishkeit all over the world. And yet, the Rebbe said many times that I officially don't speak on a phone, and he didn't. He spoke minimally. A phone, let alone a fax, computer. How does a man change the world without even having a computer or fax? The answer is because the Rebbe knew what the Iker was, what a Tofel was. Moshe Rabbeinu changed the world and there was no technology. Now, you could say, well, we're not Moshe Rabbeinus, we go to business, we work, we need news, we have all kinds of things. But it's just a lesson in life that maybe it's good to know when you're addicted to it, at least acknowledge it, and see how far off you are from the Iker. If you're looking at it as how you're spreading Yiddishkeit and everything you do on the mobile is basically another tool to share a word of Chassidus with somebody, and that's what obsesses you, that would be beautiful. But that's obviously not the reason that we're so taken by it. So it's a good, maybe the mobile phone, like many other things, is a good Bal Musar. Sometimes you hear it from a teacher, sometimes you hear it from a mentor, sometimes you hear it from a Magid. Technology today, the way it takes control of our lives, is the best Bal Musar, the best thing to teach you something. Look how fickle and how vulnerable and how susceptible you are, impressionable you are to anything that attracts you. But this is nothing new. It says, V'sartem achrei einechem. And maybe taka what that's a deeper meaning in the Shema now. What are you waking up with and what are you going to sleep with? With a dvar Teira, a word from Teira? With the Bartabam, or with your phone? And I speak to myself like everyone. I'm in the same world like all of us. But it's an excellent opportunity to look at yourself. When there's no technology, you could say, okay, distractions. You don't feel so distracted. But today, the fact of the matter is we are addicted. You sit at a meeting, everybody's by their phone. There's no personal relationships, no personal connections. When's the last time you had a conversation with someone for an hour, face-to-face, without any disturbances? Not checking your phone, not doing anything. So sometimes a negative comes a positive by it glaringly showing you, look what happens to us. I see it with children. Look how easily hypnotized they become by the iPads, by anything visual. It's a great babysitter. We all know that. And you see how they begin to resist being torn away from it. So this is an opportunity for us to recognize how addicted we become to these type of things and how off we are from the kavanah. Because if you're focused on the kavanah, you're a soldier in the army, you have time to check your text, you're in the middle of a war. You can't be checking your text. You're busy fighting, you're busy conquering, you're busy achieving something. So I don't have a quick solution. I think it's a matter of yediyas hamachla chetzer refuah. Knowing the problem makes you aware of it. Maybe think about it. Think about it. And I know it's so difficult because it's not a bad habit in the sense where it's a drug, alcohol, gambling, where you see mamish destruction coming out of it. This is a far more, as I said, insidious. It's far more subtle. But it definitely makes you unable to focus. You learn a shtickle Gemara, Halacha, a Rambam, a Vort Chassidus. You're completely immersed in there. The Rebbe used to say many times, you don't even hear the phone ring. That's Teiraseh Menaseh. So 24/7 is hard to expect for most of us. But the time you're learning, that's how it should be. Total immersion. And that focus and concentration comes and pays you back many times over. So as far as spouses go, it's hard to know how to exactly bring it up without sounding accusatory and attacking and opening yourself up to a battle. It's still an issue, and I think just by talking about it, that's already a matter. Maybe one of the ways to go, I just thought of an idea, the Adam Medaite, Shalem Medaite, is to bring up to your spouse that you know somebody that has this issue. What would you advise? Because everyone gives very good advice when other people have this problem. When in truth, you're really talking about your spouse. But ask them, what would you advise? I know a friend that's having a problem, marital issues, etc., and their spouse is completely addicted to their mobile phone and to their technology. Your spouse will probably come up with very good ideas. And maybe you don't have to even bring it back to them. Maybe that alone will plant the seed. You know, the famous story of the Rebbe Marash. Someone came to the Rebbe Marash and said, I have a friend who did something really bad. He's ashamed to come to the Rebbe. So he sent me as a shliach to ask for a tikkun, for something. How do I fix it? So the Rebbe Marash looked at him and said, why would your friend be comfortable exposing himself to you? He could have come to me and not say it's him and say, I have a friend. You understand the point. The friend was talking about himself, but he didn't want to say it to the Rebbe Marash. So one of the ways maybe is to ask, and this could be used in many situations. If you're having a problem, maybe the best way is to ask the wise counsel of your spouse, and say, I have someone I know, an issue like this, and what would you advise? Now, if both spouses are watching this episode of MyLife, I may have sprung the secret, but nevertheless, the person will never know whether you actually mean somebody else or not. And there's always someone out there that can be helped. And maybe this goes in the gather of Kol HaMispal Ba'at Chaverei Hu Nen Etchila, that when you pray for somebody in need, God blesses you first. So maybe you should help someone else in this situation, and maybe then it will reciprocate and come back to you in many times over. With this, we have come to the end and close of this episode. The month of Elul, we have, I said, almost a little less than 11 days till Tishrei, till Rosh Hashanah. Maybe use them well. Hope some of these ideas planted some seeds in all of us that can help us make Elul far more real, dynamic vitality in the Chassidish Eifen, and an Eifen that infuses neshama soul, and especially with our children. Children come home from school. Find a creative way to, before they go to sleep, to have a talk with them about this month, about something they can do. And that alone, that through our children, that alone brings back a vitality into each of us. So that's yet another eitzah. You don't have to look far. You don't have to go far. You go into your own home. Sometimes inspiring someone close to you, it alone will bring you inspiration as well. So everyone should have a ksiv v'chsim teva, shana teva mesuka. Next week we'll be doing a special episode, Rosh Hashanah episode. Be definitely covering all kinds of personal topics as well, but through the lens of Rosh Hashanah. So until then, this has been MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 34. And everyone should have, as I said, a ksiv v'chsim teva, and a very good gebench week, a good gebench yor. Thank you.